My 3-year-old son had a 104-degree fever and was shaking in his crib, but my husband told me I was killing his vibe because he had a VIP table booked at a club. He literally told me that if I called an ambulance, I should make sure they didn't wake him up when he got back because he deserved a night off from my paranoia. I haven't slept in 48 hours. Our son Leo has been battling a brutal fever for 2 days straight. I've been living on coffee and adrenaline, constantly checking his temperature and trying to keep him hydrated while he cries in his sleep. It's exhausting, and I'm at my breaking point. Meanwhile, my husband Kyle spent the entire day in the office room with his noise cancellings, headphones on, playing Valorant. He didn't check on Leo once. He didn't even bring me a glass of water. Every time I went in there to ask for help, he'd just point at his headset and tell me he was in a ranked match and couldn't leave. Around 9 p.m. I heard him showering and putting on cologne. He walked into the kitchen looking like he was going to a photo shoot. I asked him where he thought he was going, and he casually mentioned a networking event with his friends. I told him he couldn't leave. Leo's fever was spiking again, and I was terrified. I showed him the thermometer. It said 103.8. I was shaking, literally begging him to stay just in case we had to go to the hospital. Kyle didn't even look at the baby. He just rolled his eyes and told me I was being an anxious mess and that I always overreact to every little sniffle. He said he worked hard all week and he wasn't going to waste a prepaid VIP table because I wanted to doom scroll. WebMD all night. I tried to grab his arm to stop him, but he just brushed me off like I was a nuisance. He told me to stop being dramatic and that he'd be back late, so I shouldn't bother calling him unless the house was literally on fire. He walked out, slammed the front door, and I heard him peel out of the driveway while Leo started whimpering in the other room. I was officially on my own. Around 1 a.m., the house went from a tense silence to a nightmare. Leo started making a terrifying rhythmic jerking motion in his crib. His eyes were rolled back and he wasn't responding when I screamed his name. He was having a seizure from the fever. I had never felt a panic like that in my life. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unlock my phone. I called Kyle immediately. It rang once and went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I called 10 times, then 15, then 20. By the 21st call, the phone didn't even ring anymore. He had manually turned it off. He had actually silenced his phone while his son was having a medical emergency because he didn't want me ruining his night out with his friends. I didn't have time to process the betrayal. I scooped Leo up in a blanket, grabbed my keys, and ran to the car. I was driving through the city at 90 miles per hour, crying so hard I could barely see the road through the blur of street lights. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I just saw his limp body in the car seat. I was screaming at the steering wheel, begging him to stay with me, while the person who was supposed to be my partner was somewhere drinking and laughing. I pulled up to the emergency room entrance and left, the car running in the middle of the lane. I ran inside carrying him, screaming for help. A team of nurses and the doctor rushed over and took him from my arms. They rushed him behind double doors, and I was left standing there in the middle of the lobby, covered in my son's sweat and my own tears, clutching a dead cell phone. The hospital was cold and smelled like bleach. The only sound was the steady mechanical beep of monitors from the hallway. I sat on a plastic chair for hours, staring at a wall, waiting for someone to tell me if my baby was going to be okay. I felt completely hollow. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a text back, a call. Anything to show that Kyle had a shred of humanity left, but there was nothing. Just a black screen and the realization that I was raising a child with a man-child who chose a bar over his son's life. After hours that felt like an eternity, the doctor finally came out and told me that Leo was stable. He explained it was a febrile seizure triggered by his temperature rising too fast. Leo was finally asleep in a hospital bed with an IV in his small hand. I slumped against the cold hallway wall and sat on the floor, feeling completely drained. Then my phone vibrated. My heart skipped because I thought it was Kyle finally calling back. It wasn't. It was an Instagram notification. One of Kyle's best friends, someone he had gone out with that night, had just posted a story. I opened it with shaking hands. The video was shot in a loud, strobe-lit club. Right there in the middle of the crowd, I saw my husband. He didn't look like a man stressed about work. He was standing on a couch holding a bottle of liquor and laughing at the ceiling. The camera zoomed in as a woman I didn't recognize wrapped her arms around his neck, Kyle didn't pull away. He grabbed her waist instead and kissed her, passionately in front of everyone, while his friends cheered in the background. At the bottom of the video there was a huge caption, "Living his best life. Single vibes." I checked the timestamp. The video was posted at the exact moment I was screaming in the ER, begging doctors to save our son's life. Strangely, I stopped crying. The pain I felt earlier just vanished, replaced by a terrifying hollow coldness. Something inside me just died and froze over. Very calmly, I took screenshots of the video, the woman's profile and the caption. I saved them all to a hidden folder. I turned off my screen and looked at my messy reflection. There was no more fear. I just had one very clear plan in my head. Kyle wanted to feel like a single man, and I was going to make sure he got exactly what he wanted forever. The sun was starting to come up when I finally left the hospital. Leah was staying with my mother, who had rushed to the hospital the moment she got my message. She didn't ask questions. She just saw my face and knew everything had changed. I drove home in a trance, my mind sharper and more focused than it had been in years. The house was dark and smelled like the stale cologne Kyle had sprayed before leaving. I didn't waste a second. I didn't scream and I didn't break anything. I went straight to the office and opened our shared bank account on the laptop. I transferred every single cent of the savings, money I had earned working overtime while he spent his checks on gaming skins and bar tabs, into a private account he didn't even know existed. It was all legal, but it was a death blow to his lifestyle. Next, I moved through the house like a ghost. I packed 3 large suitcases with all of Leo's clothes, his favorite toys, and my own essentials. I worked with a cold mechanical efficiency. I made sure to pack the legal documents, our birth certificates, and the spare car keys. I walked into the living room and saw our dog Cooper sitting by the door waiting for a master who wasn't coming home. I grabbed his leash and his food bowl. Kyle barely remembered to feed him anyway. He didn't deserve the comfort of a loyal pet in an empty house. Before I locked the door for the last time, I went to the dining table. I took the printouts I had made at the hospital's business center, clear, high-quality stills of him kissing that woman while our son was in the ER. I laid them out in a row like a deck of cards. Right on top, I placed the business card of the most aggressive divorce lawyer in the city. I loaded the car, put Cooper in the back seat, and looked at the house one last time. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just a building full of expensive electronics. And a man who was about to wake up to the most expensive hangover of his life. I pulled out of the driveway and didn't look back. Kyle finally crawled back to the house around 2 p.m., looking like a total wreck. I know this because my neighbor texted me that his car hit the curb when he pulled in. He probably expected to walk into a dark house, crawl into bed, and have me bring him Advil and water while he complained about a headache. Instead, he walked into a tomb. No barking dog, no crying baby, no wife. Just the silence of a house that had been stripped of its soul. When he finally reached the kitchen and saw the photos on the table, he must have realized his phone was still off. I can only imagine the look on his face when he turned it on, and saw the 50 missed calls from the hospital and my final text, telling him that his son almost died while he was playing single at a club. I told him in that message to never look for us again. He tried to show up at the hospital an hour later, smelling like a brewery and crying about how it was all a big misunderstanding. But I had already spoken to hospital security and the local police. I showed them the medical records from the night before and the photos of him intoxicated. They didn't even let him pass the lobby. They escorted him out like a common trespasser while people in the waiting room watched. The fallout was faster than he expected. I didn't just send those photos to a lawyer. I sent them to his boss at the firm where he worked. They have a very strict morality clause and a reputation to uphold. Being the face of a viral deadbeat dad post isn't good for business. He was fired by Monday morning. Now I'm sitting in my parents' garden watching Leo play on the grass. He's healthy, happy, and has no idea how close he came to losing everything. Kyle keeps trying to call from different numbers, begging for a second chance and crying about how he has no money and no one to talk to. I just block them one by one. He wanted the single life so badly that he threw away a family for a few hours of fun. Now he has all the freedom in the world and absolutely no one to share it with. I realized that for years I was carrying the weight of 2 adults and a child all by myself. The moment I walked out that door, the weight of his ego and his constant gaslighting finally fell off my shoulders. It's funny how a house can feel so much lighter. without a 200-pound toddler dragging everyone down. I'm currently staying with my parents, and for the first time in a long time, I actually feel safe. My mom has been a godsend, and Leo is back to his usual energetic self, completely unaware of the storm we just walked through. As for the legal side of things, my lawyer is confident. Those screenshots and the medical records are pretty much an open and shut case for full custody. I'm posting this because I spent so long thinking I was crazy or dramatic just like he said I was. If you're in a situation where your partner makes you feel like an inconvenience for having basic needs or for caring about your children, leave. Don't wait for a crisis to show you who they really are. They already showed you a long time ago. You were just too kind to believe them. I'll update if anything major happened with the court hearing, but for now, I'm just going to enjoy the silence. No gaming noises, no smell of cheap club cologne, and most importantly, no more dead weight holding us back. Thanks for all the support and the messages. It really helped me realize I wasn't the villain for protecting my son.